Okay, Adam McKay, congratulations on your two Oscar nominations for The Big Short. So when you first started making this movie, what were your expectations for it? Did you ever think that it could be a major awards player or, find such a big audience?
You never ever think about awards ever. Obviously in the past I've done mostly absurdist comedies, but in this case, pretty much the rule is no one bring up any of that ever while you're making it. So our real hopes were we knew we had this amazing cast, we knew we had this like titanic important subject. Our goal was to get a conversation going. Our goal was to reignite a sort of bank reform dialogue in our country. And obviously, we worked as hard as we could to make the movie accessible for mainstream audiences so they could participate in this. So, at the end of the day, it definitely met and exceeded our goals as far as what we wanted with the movie. I'm especially thrilled that it's played so well commercially because, there's a chance with a movie like this where the style is, not traditional, where the subject matter is more difficult, that we could have had problems with that. But man, I mean, we just crossed 100 million worldwide, and it seems to keep playing. So we're thrilled with the response.
Well, I want to go back to when you first got involved, because as you said, you've done a lot of absurdist comedies before this. What about it really spoke to you as like, okay, I could do this,
It was, I've been doing a lot of reading about the financial crisis, economics in general. I've always been a guy who's been pretty politically active and a bit of a politics junkie and, been active in a lot of causes. So I started to realize when we did The Other Guys with Mark Wahlberg and Will Ferrell that there was this connection between politics and finance that was way stronger than I ever realized. And I tend to get a little obsessive. So once I discovered it, I just kept reading and reading and asking questions and questions. And at the end of the day, when you do that, you're eventually going to read The Big Short. And I think it was actually advertised on This American Life. I think that's how I came across it. And I just couldn't put it down. It was such a great combination of amazing characters, brisk, energetic, fun, dare I say fun, even though it's a tragic storytelling, but most of all, this kind of cogent, well-targeted information that really kind of turned me on as a reader and helped me understand what was going on. And I've read very, very few books, that kind of combination. I mean, some of the Eric Larson historical novels have that a little bit too, but this was about something that was happening right now. And at that point, I just had to make it as a movie.
Mm-hmm. You're nominated at the Oscars for both writing and directing. Tell me, just, I want to ask about, I guess, the cast. Brad Pitt is one of your producers. He's nominated for Best Picture. What's it like having the producer of your movie be one of your cast members? Does he let you do your thing, or does he speak up?
He's, the beauty of Plan B with Jeremy Kleiner, Dee Dee Gardner, and Brad is that they're such supporters of filmmakers. So throughout the whole process, they were so open to these, these ideas like breaking the fourth wall and the way we shot it. But at the same time, they're really smart people, so they were constantly chiming in when we were putting the cast together, when we were making decisions about how and what we were going to shoot, script notes. But make no mistake about it, the second Brad showed up on set as an actor, he was a full actor. The only thing he did, which I thought was a little petty, was he refused to let me have a trailer. I had to be in a pup tent with a toaster oven, and that was just me. I think that was him flexing his muscles.
So I want to talk about the script because you're one of the writers on it. And the book is, dare I say, difficult to adapt. So how did you adapt it into a movie? Where'd you start?
Well, my first thought was that, you do whatever the story needs to do. You listen to the story and you follow its lead. And with this kind of strange amalgam of information with compelling characters, it was obvious right away that you had to open the movie up. There had to be a breaking of the fourth wall. And obviously, anytime you're going to break the fourth wall, you're breaking the #1 primary command of all film schools, which is show, don't tell.
Mhm.
So if you're going to do it, you really got to think it through. And so I did a lot of research on it. And, I'd done some when I used to perform and direct theater back in Chicago in the 90s. So I was familiar with it. And I watch a lot of movies, so I knew movies that have done it. Obviously, Woody Allen has done it for comedic effect and as like a little detail. 24-Hour Party People, I think, is one of the best movies at succeeding and pulling it off. So that was my number one thought, was this is how you get past this information being seemingly boring and dense, is you tell the audience, you're supposed to feel bored. Don't feel bored. And it was really exciting in the first screenings we did when we told the audience that. You could feel this relief just ripple through the audience of right at the moment where it started to get dense, we told the audience you're supposed to be bored. The banks want you to be bored. And then it was sort of off to the races at that point.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Gosling is your main source for breaking that fourth wall and doing that, explaining things to the audience. Why was he the right guy for that particular role?
It's funny, I'd met with Ryan a couple times through the years, and we had really hit it off. He's a unique guy because he's a guy who's a writer, director, he studies films, yet at the same time, obviously a very well-known actor, very skilled actor, so I needed someone in that role who could play, the sort of quarterback of the movie, the narrator of the movie, and at the same time give a grounded, committed, lively performance as a character. And I just kept coming back to his name when I was writing the script. I mean, he was my very first choice. And sure enough, he just has a nimbleness to his acting, and he has this sense of humor, but it's always straight-faced, it's always grounded, that was perfect for this role. I think he actually has one of the trickiest roles in the movie because he has to do so many different things.
Mm-hmm. And Steve Carell, too, I mean, you've worked with him a lot. What made him right for this part? It's such an interesting kind of departure in a lot of ways for him.
The movie that really got me thinking about Carell for this role was not Foxcatcher, which I love that movie. It was actually the way back was the movie where I started thinking, I saw more anger and darkness in Carell in the way back. That's what it's called, right? The way back?
It is, yeah.
Yeah. I saw more anger and darkness in him in that role than I'd ever seen before. And then on top of it, I then saw Foxcatcher, which knocked me over, and I thought he was just phenomenal, and I thought Ruffalo just blew me away. So the combination of those two movies, that was probably one of the hardest characters to cast, because he's an angry guy, but he's vulnerable, yet you love him, he kind of represents the audience, so it's a very demanding role. And when you start thinking of it in those terms, the list gets really short really fast, and Carell was at the top of it. He's a guy who can transform, but in a grounded way. He's a guy who never gives up on a scene, is always looking for it to be original, to find the spark that cuts across what you would expect. Oddly, I would compare him to Christian Bale in the sense as far as his level of preparation for the character was just astounding, the amount of work he did for it. So, yeah, that was purely through what does this character need, and it's funny that my logical conclusion became like a really good old friend of mine.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you mentioned Christian Bale. We've talked about the other three, we might as well talk about him. He's nominated at the Oscars for supporting actor. When I saw it, my first reaction after thinking about it a little while was, the others interact at some point, but he's kind of in his own little mini movie here. He never meets the other three. Just, can you talk a little bit about his character and what he brought to the role?
Yeah, I always looked at this movie as three different stories. I looked at it as the Christian Bale character was sort of the oracle. He was the one who saw this before anyone else. And it is true, the real guy did not leave his office much. He sat in his office and listened to speed metal and read numbers, is really what he did. And then I looked at Carell as sort of the guy, the hero, venturing out to openly confront the evil, sort of the Jason and the Argonauts, he and his team. And then the young guys were Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and sort of tumbling after the main story, the main tragedy. So once again, Christian Bale was top of my list. I needed an actor who was selfless, who would subsume himself to the character. I also had a feeling that Bale would be intrigued by this character, and the way I talked to him about it was I said, this is an introvert. This is almost an aggressively introverted guy who's the hero. And we talked about how many times has that happened in history, that you've had an introvert as the hero. I mean, we talked about the old I Claudius or the Emperor Claudius in the old PBS series. We talked about a couple other examples, but right away Bale was intrigued by that. And of course, you guys know Christian Bale is just famous for transforming. So he spent tons of time with the real guy. And by the time he showed up on set, we had some conversations about what he was doing. It was just, I've never seen anything like it. It just knocked me over.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things that I really loved about the movie is how stylistically daring it is. I mean, you talked about breaking the fourth wall, but it's interesting that you have that, and then you have this kind of cinema verite feeling to it with the handheld cameras and the jump cuts, and you're like finding the focus point of the shot in a lot of ways. Can you talk about why that style was appropriate for this material?
Absolutely. I watched all the Wall Street movies you can watch in preparation for this, and there's some good ones. I mean, the Oliver Stone one obviously is legendary. I think Margin Call is a really good movie. Obviously, the documentary. I found some obscure ones, Master of the Universe, this German documentary. I watched a lot of movies. Even watched It's a Wonderful Life. Even watched Trading Places. And the thing I noticed was that all these movies tend to portray Wall Street as this kind of proscenium, almost Roman kind of powerful force. And they're usually shot pretty traditionally. There's a lot of marble. There's a lot of guys in perfect suits with perfect haircuts. And just once again, letting the story tell you what to do, it became apparent that's not this story. These are the guys who are outside that. These are the guys who, have sweat stains under their arms. These are the guys who don't make eye contact. And these are the guys who will annoy you at a party. So I wanted to be inside their anxiety. I wanted to be inside their excitement in a way that just traditional framing would not do. And when you start thinking in terms of that sort of impressionistic verite style, the master of that is Barry Ackroyd. Mm-hmm. So he was one of the first calls I made, and thank Zeus, he was he enjoyed the script and was in. So he was a very important hire. And the big question for me shooting the movie was, can you blend that verite style with montages and occasionally dolly shots? And that was the question the entire time I had. And thank God when I got in the edit room with Hank Corwin, it was like, yes, you can. Audiences are ready for this blend. So that was a giant relief for us.
Mm-hmm. You've got these 2 Oscar nominations. Are you already a member of the Academy?
I am not. I'm not a member of the Academy, so I would be thrown out if I was.
Well, you're going to be invited this summer, and you have to choose a branch. Since you've got 2 nominations, you'll be invited by both the director's branch and the writer's branch. Do you have a feeling as to which one you would join?
Well, that's tough. What's the one? I love documentaries. What's the one where I get to watch a lot of documentaries? Is there one where I get to?
I think any member can sign up to do that. You would also be able to vote on Best Picture in the nomination phase. But just in terms of joining a branch, you would have to choose between directors and writers.
That may be the most difficult question anyone has asked me this entire process. That is.
Well, you'll have to June to decide, so you've got a few months.
I have to literally think of that because I definitely started as a writer, but obviously I'm a director, so I'm going to have to, I'm going to the DGA thing this Saturday, so maybe I'll ask some of the directors to tell me why I should join.
Well, say directors for today so that they don't get mad at you before Saturday.
I'm definitely joining the director's branch. There's no question.
I will say one thing on your that's good from your perspective. Just like 4 or 5 years ago, they created a new rule that if you've been nominated in another category other than your branch, and this is for many years to come, you do get to nominate in that branch. But for a long time, you could only nominate in your own branch.
Because I got nominated for stunts in The English Patient. So I don't know what that does.
That was you. Oh man, I thought you.
That was me.
For Kirsten,
you flew the airplane, right?
I flew the airplane, exactly. Thank you, sir. Yeah, it's been a long time to get back to the Academy, to the Oscars, but I'm
back. So you mentioned working with the editor. I just want to ask you, since there are so many storylines in this movie, and also just all this Wall Street jargon, can you talk about, once you've got all this footage, assembling it into a cohesive narrative film?
Yeah, I mean, we knew we had taken some risks with some of the shooting. I knew there were cases where I probably had too much. I wanted to make sure I was covered for that edit room. And fortunately, I found one of the great, master editors that's out there in Hank Corbin, who's truly an inspired artist. And he and I had lengthy conversations about what we wanted this movie to be and what I was thinking. He's a great guy at taking your initial idea and then pushing it 2 steps further. So, the storylines with the characters were fairly contained. There were obviously a lot of choices involved as far as take and how we cut them. But the big thing that really expanded in the edit room was this idea of we wanted to see the outside world. We wanted to see American culture. What were we talking about while we were ignoring this? What, once the suffering hit from the collapse, what did that look like? So we didn't want the movie to only be in offices. And Hank Corbin did a lot of brilliant work on this movie, but I think that's some of his best work, is he really has such a great sense for how the human mind takes in frames of film. And he knows how long to hit you with an image where it doesn't overstay its welcome and feel clunky. He's got such a great rhythm and sense of that. So he and I really worked together on expanding that sense of the outside world, and that's where the montages came out of with Ludacris. That's where, in the end, I think a couple of the most powerful images are the shots of people's possessions in the streets, the tent city that the people are living in after the collapse. That was really the stuff we ended up chasing, and we ended up constantly looking at stock footage and just playing with it. And we were lucky enough to have our brilliant composer, Nicholas Bertel, right across from the hall from us very early on. So he was involved in this as we would experiment with stuff, scoring it. But yeah, the character storylines, yes, there were choices to be made, but it was really that sense of the larger world was the part we kept messing with.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned a moment ago you've got the DGA coming up this weekend. You've still got Writers Guild, BAFTA, the Oscars, but Producers Guild. The movie wins the Producers Guild Award for Best Picture just a few days ago, and that they've been right 8 years in a row at the Oscars in terms of Best Picture. What was your reaction winning that?
I was out of New York doing a load of press, and I had just gone to bed, and my phone started ringing off the hook. And I thought it was my wife or my kids, because we always check in at that hour, but sometimes if I'm exhausted, I'll tell them, I'll call you in the morning. And I said, I have to sleep, I'm tired. And then the next morning I woke up and I saw all these calls from Dee Dee Gardner, Megan Colligan, Rob Moore, people from Paramount. And it was thrilling. And my favorite part is I really just love Plan B, and I love seeing Dee Dee and Jeremy up there getting acknowledged for all the great work they did. As far as the streak goes, I'm a sports fan as well, and I feel like every time you tell me my favorite sports team has won 8 times in a row or 9 times in a row, they lose that 10th one. So I refuse to buy into the streak. But let's hope it's correct in this case.
Mm-hmm. So, you're talking about all of this footage of the tent cities and things like that, and it just got me thinking, like, this story really does have a lot of relevance to today, even though it took place almost 10 years ago, it seems. What do you hope that this movie can do in terms of starting a conversation?
Well, one of the exciting things was that we really felt like this conversation shouldn't have stopped. That what really happened was it was 7 years ago you had the collapse, or you could say maybe 8 years ago if you count 2007. A lot of people suffered. A lot of people lost jobs. The economy tanked for really most of the world. And we then came up with Dodd-Frank, which, by the way, has some good things in it, should not be thrown away. And then that was kind of it. And then we've had this very slow recovery where wages have been flat, and the banks have continued to grow and grow. And they're 35 to 40% bigger now than they were leading up to the collapse. The ratings agencies have continued to grow in size. And it's very apparent for most economists, most financial journalists, that we still have problems with too big to fail. And that's the danger, because if they go down again, we're going to pay for it again. So our goal with this movie was, we don't view this movie as a right-wing or left-wing movie. This was just to get this conversation started again so that average people could participate in it. People that were told before that it's too complicated or it's too boring, they could jump into the conversation. And, you know, so far it's been very exciting. We've been to Washington, D.C. You know, we were at the Brookings Institute. We met with some financial people through the Obama administration. Trying to think what else we've done. We've done like...
Did you meet with Elizabeth Warren? Is that...
What's that?
I said, didn't you meet with Elizabeth Warren? I thought I saw something like
Elizabeth Warren. My favorite part is there's been a bunch of arguments between financial journalists. There was like a negative piece from Politico, but then 2 other economists came back slamming that, and a guy from the Wall Street Journal didn't like it, but then someone else from like Paul Krugman defended it, and this is what we wanted. We wanted this conversation to open up again, and the fact that now you have a chunk of the American people involved in it, you know, I feel like the movie's about halfway through its lifespan, and we're just hoping this can continue to snowball. And it's already been good to see it show up on the Democratic side of the presidential campaign. Sanders has been mentioning it. It's been a point of contention between him and Hillary. But I would love to see it show up on the right side of the aisle as well. I mean, we've gotten some support from, believe it or not, like Bill O'Reilly, Greta Van Susteren, both love the movie. Who would have thunk it? But it really, once again, just shows that it's not a right-wing, left-wing issue. So that was our goal. So far, we're feeling really good. We feel like we've definitely got that conversation going. But fingers crossed, there's more work to be done.
Mm-hmm. Well, Adam, as we wrap up here, we were both wondering, we had lunch earlier today, and we're talking about, we wondered where your career goes from here in your mind. Do you want to do more of these types of movies in terms of, you know, critically acclaimed and awards kind of movies, or do you want to go back and do some outrageous comedies, or maybe a combination of both?
You know, I think one of the exciting things I discovered on this movie is that, you know, the genres are getting a little less defined. And what I would love to see if I could do is if I could make a comedy that's even more laugh-driven, but at the same time just as relevant. Is it possible to even split these 2 genres even more? I'm sort of playing with that idea a little bit. But then in the bigger picture, I mean, you know, I love all kinds of movies. So I have a couple just straight ahead dramas that I'm kind of developing right now and kicking around. And I have one that's more of a kind of larger action drama that I'm playing with. So, you know, the great thing that's resulted from this is just that suddenly there's some premises and ideas that I've had for years that suddenly I can engage with. But I think there's no question I'll never go back to doing exactly what I did before. But I certainly do love to laugh. And I think it can be a vital part of important stories as well.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much, and congratulations on the film and on its success, and good luck with the rest of award season.
Thank you, guys. Pleasure talking with you.
Yeah, it's nice talking to you too. Have a good day.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.